Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Now, we're starting the final week of Series 7 of today's Tolkien Times, and it's been a lot of fun doing these Middle-earth Map Mondays. I might even do them again next series. The feedback from you has been so encouraging. So let's start off week 57 with what is, for now, our still new Monday segment. I have had a lot of fun putting together all of these episodes, right? We've looked at the Shire and the Old Forest. We've looked at the Barrow Downs and Bree, Lindon and the Grey Havens, along with the two capitals of Arnor, Annúminas and Fornost. Today, we're going to look at the three kingdoms that Arnor split into, Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur. It'll be a very brief overview, and I'll likely have to revisit each one individually some other time. Now, as a brief reminder, Arnor was the northern of the two realms in exile and was the seat of the High King Elendil, while his sons ruled Gondor jointly. After Isildur's death in the disaster of the Gladden Fields in Third Age 2, in theory, his last surviving son Valandil should have become the High King. But Isildur had committed the rule of Gondor to his nephew Meneldil, son of Anarion, and thus the two kingdoms were no longer united under one rule. Anarion's line was ruling Gondor, and Isildur's line was ruling Arnor. But then, in Third Age 861, after the death of Arnor's 10th king, Eärendil, we read this in Appendix A. After Eärendil, owing to dissensions among his sons, their realm was divided into three, Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardolan. Guess that's going to make for some uncomfortable family gatherings, but there you have it. Now, Arthedain was the largest and longest surviving of the three, so of course we'll get to it another time. Instead, we're going to start with Rhudaur. From Appendix A, Rhudaur was in the northeast and lay between the Etten Moors, the Weather Hills, and the Misty Mountains, but included also the angle between the Horwell and the Loudwater. Now, to help you picture this, remember the Weather Hills are a range that runs north to south, ending with the peak of Amansul right there on the road. Now, those hills form the western border of Rhudaur, but they belonged to Arthedain, and that's important later. The Etten Moors are hills that run west to east. They end at the Misty Mountains. They're kind of a spur of the Misty Mountains, well to the north of Rivendell. So that's sort of the southwest and northeast corners of the realm. The East Road forms the southern boundary until you get to the Horwell, at which point Rhudaur also includes the Angle. Now, that's that area of land south of the road between the rivers Mythaethel and Bruinen. Now, Cardolan was to the south of Rhudaur. Its western boundary was the Brandywine River, from the bridge all the way down to the sea. Its eastern boundary was the Horwell, also from the last bridge down to the sea. Their northern border was the East Road, and if you look at a map, you'll figure out their southern border was simply the ocean. Now, the reason that I started with these two realms and their geography was because of what isn't in either of them. Annúminas, the Tower of Elostirion, and Amansul. Those three places had two things in common. They were all in the realm of Arnor, and they all had a Palantir. Now, Elostirion and Annúminas were never really in doubt, but the Weather Hills were the western border of Rhudaur and were just across the road from the northern border of Cardolan, and those two realms were none too pleased about this. From Appendix A, there was often strife between the kingdoms, which hastened the waning of the Dunedain. The chief matter of debate was the possession of the Weather Hills and the land westward towards Bree. Both Rhudaur and Cardolan desired to possess Amansul, Weathertop, which stood on the borders of their realms, for the Tower of Amansul held the chief Palantir of the north, and the other two were both in the keeping of Arthedain. Now, during the reign of Malvigil, the sixth king of Arthedain, in Third Age 1349, so this is a little less than 500 years after the split, we read that at that time the realm of Angmar arose in the north beyond the Etten Moors. Its lands lay on both sides of the mountains, and there were gathered many evil men and orcs and other fell creatures. The lord of that land was known as the Witch King, but it was not known until later that he was indeed the chief of the Ringwraiths, who came north with the purpose of destroying the Dunedain in Arnor, seeing hope in their disunion, while Gondor was strong. Now, later, Malvigil's son, Argeleb I, not Argeleb II, who gave the Shire to the hobbits, Argeleb I claimed lordship over all of Arnor again, because the line of Isildur had failed in the other two realms. Now, Cardolan was fine by this. They acceded to that move, but Rhudaur not so much. The claim was resisted by Rhudaur, There the Dunedain were few, and power had been seized by an evil lord of the hillmen who was in secret league with Angmar. Argeleb therefore fortified the Weather Hills, but he was slain in battle with Rudar and Angmar. So, sometime before 1349, Rudar had essentially fallen to Angmar and the hillmen, while Cardolan and Arthedain remained faithful. Sadly, Cardolan was next, though. A great host came out of Angmar in 1409, and crossing the river entered Cardolan and surrounded Weathertop. The Dunedain were defeated, and Arveleg, the son of Argeleb, was slain. The tower of Amansul was burned and razed, but the Palantir was saved and carried back in retreat to Fornost. Rudar was occupied by evil men subject to Angmar, and the Dunedain that remained there were slain or fled west. Cardolan was ravaged. But they weren't quite gone yet. Ravaged, yes, but not gone. That would happen a couple of hundred years later, when in or just after 1636, the Great Plague devastated the region. In the Tale of Years, we read that many parts of Eriador become desolate, and in Appendix A, most of the people of Cardolan perished, especially in Menhiriath. It was at this time that an end came of the Dunedain of Cardolan, and evil spirits out of Angmar and Rudar entered into the deserted mounds and dwelt there. The last few remaining Dunedain of Cardolan had been holding out in the Barrow Downs, as we've talked about on one or two earlier Mondays. Now, before I wrap up, just a bit of word nerdery on each. Rudar is Sindarin and clearly contains the lenited form Daur, which is from the element tower or forest. Taur Nufuin, forest under night. But that Ru element is interesting. Prior to the publication of Parma El Delamberon 17, both Hammond and Skull and David Salo suggested that this initial element was a prefix form of Rune, meaning east, thus east forest, which certainly fits. But in Parma El Delamberon 17, Tolkien says it's the element Ru, meaning evil. Now, that seems an unlikely name for the Dunedain to give their own land, so maybe it's a later given name. Or maybe it's East Forest after all, I don't know. It's just an interesting element. Cardolan is also Sindarin. The name isn't glossed anywhere, but Salo, Hammond and Skull, and Paul Strack have all suggested that it means Red Hill country or Red Hill land, from the elements Karan, meaning red. We see that in Caradhras, Redhorn, Carcharoth, Red Maw. Dol, meaning head or hill, like Dol Amroth, Dol Guldur, Mindalowan, etc. And the Ian suffix, I-A-N, meaning land or country, Ithilien, Beleriand, Lorien. Now, we have most certainly run out of time to talk about the biggest and most important of the three remnant kingdoms, Arthedain. So I guess that means we're going to need to do Middle-earth Map Mondays again when Series 8 starts up after the 2-week hiatus. For now, though, folks, that wraps it up for Middle-earth Map Monday. If you have a mailbag question you'd like me to answer, not in Series 8, but in Series 9, please email it to barnum@theprancingponypodcast.com. Send it in and let them know it's for today's Tolkien Times. I'll get to it when I can, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Now, I am really grateful for the support of my patrons. They're the ones who make it possible for me to invest the time and resources into researching, writing, shooting, producing these episodes. If you'd like to be a part of that, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get an ad-free feed, and more. And then join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.